Yo, what's going on, everybody? My name is Liam and I pick fights. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys my first look at UFC Vegas 76. And we're, of course, talking about Sean Strickland against Abus Magomedov. And you may be asking yourself, if you're a UFC casual, if you don't tune in each and every week, who is Abus Magomedov? He's a guy who's fairly new to the organization, but he's coming in with some hype. He's coming in with some quick finish in the first round over Dustin Stoltzfus. So now he's getting a big main event showcase. We're back at the Apex. We did the big shows, the big crowds in Jacksonville, got some big fights under our belt, but now we've got, a card that doesn't have the same name value necessarily, but this is a card that's got a lot of fun fights stacked throughout. So excited to talk about it. 12 fights on the card, pretty high level action strewn throughout. So let's discuss without any further ado. And, these are two guys that I feel like I have, opposite grasp on their careers, right? Like Sean Strickland, I feel like I know him like the back of my hand at this point. I've been on a bunch of his fights. I feel like I've had a pretty decent read more often than not. In fact, let me pull up my Bet MMA tips and see what my past history betting on Sean Strickland has been. I know it's been a little bit up and down. I know I bet Nasruddin Imavov against him, and Imavov did not look good there. One thing I will note is that when we've seen Sean Strickland fight above 185 pounds, the guy has done great. He looked so good against Brendan Allen, finishing him in the second round. Brendan Allen has looked much better since then. He's performed a lot better in subsequent performances. So I think that was something interesting that I noted, is that when he fought at 195 at the catchweight, when he fought at 205, he did very well. He struggled a little bit at 170 in terms of dealing with wrestling when he fought Kamaru Usman, in terms of dealing with pressure when he fought Santiago Ponzinibbio, and in terms of dealing with, faster, powerful strikers like Easy Dose, who hit him with that spinning head kick in the early going and separated him from consciousness. Strickland's very good, but he applies the basics over and over. It's normally jab cross, walk you down. He's got a good skill set on the ground. He can mix in the wrestling, but he oftentimes chooses not to do so. He likes to walk people down, get into a tit for tat kind of fight where he's moving, shaking, putting some shots on the shoulders, and outworking somebody over 5 rounds. And so when you put him in the low stakes Apex environment, oftentimes he's going to come out looking pretty good in those fights. Jerry Cannonier, I bet him against Jerry Cannonier. I thought he won that fight. So again, it's just, two fights where I feel like the overall read, hindsight, I get where I went wrong there. But I've cashed him in the past against Hermanson, and I think I cashed Pereira against Strickland as well. So, he's kind of just a guy that I've had a decent grasp on over time. Whereas Abus Magomedov, I'm really not as familiar with his game long term. Let me see if I bet him against Stoltzfus here, pulling up my Bet MMA tips as we speak. And that's one of the best things about the third-party record, is that you could go back and see what you've bet on these fighters before. So I have been profitable betting the fighters on this card before to the tune of 5.34 units, 11% ROI on straight bets. And in terms of Sean Strickland, let's take a look at this individual matchup. So for Sean Strickland, I bet him against Jack Hermanson. I bet Pereira against Sean Strickland. And then I bet Strickland against Cannonier and Imavov. So just the ones that I thought. And now let me see if I bet on Magomedov before. I don't believe that I did bet him against Stoltzfus. Yeah, so I've never bet on a Magomedov fight before. So if I did, in this case, it would be the very first time. These guys have very similar records. What stands out when you look at the tail of the tape is a lot of similarity here, a lot of parity here. We've got two 32-year-olds. The difference here on paper is just that Abus has most of his experience outside the UFC, whereas Strickland grew up in front of us in the UFC, right? All the way from 170 to 185 to looking comfortable in fights at 205 pounds and 195-pound catchweights. So he has definitely grown up in front of our eyes from his 20s all the way up to his 30s now. Whereas Abus is now trying to make his mark in the UFC after accruing a lot of experience outside of the organization. So let's take a look at his record on paper. Obviously, shows wins in the PFL 3-1-1 resume. We're looking at his Tapology page here. KSW 1-0 in that organization. So just looking at his losses on paper, the number one thing that stands out to me when I look at the guy's resume is a lot of canceled bouts. So let's first see how many of those are canceled for his own fault. Muradov injury. Magomedov had some visa issues. I mean, I won't really fault him for that. Muradov withdrew from the fight. So, man, Magomedov Muradov does not want to fight this guy. That's one thing that's for sure based on this resume. Now, I'm playing. He's probably just hurt. Kizriev fight, Magomedov withdrew. So, yeah, he's withdrawn from some fights since he's been in the UFC. He withdrew from a fight with Gerald Meerschaert. Then he had visa issues. So he's had a lot of different problems in terms of getting fights booked. But now he's got a fight booked in a main event, so they're trying to get him to where he's going and find out, is this guy for real right now? But he hasn't had many fights. He lost to Lewis Taylor in 2018. Guys, if you don't follow me on Twitter, at Liam Picks Fights, I retweeted this video earlier. I believe it was from my guy, friend of the show, Prodigy MMA. He was on the stream last week or 2 weeks ago. But either way, what he had said was, Luis Taylor, he knocked this guy out in brutal fashion for $1 million, and it was quick, right? So he kind of caught him on the chin there. The wins that he has since then are over 0-0 Slavisa Simonojevic and Cesarias Kezik, 12-0 at KSW. So impressive stuff there, but just overall, the impressive wins on his resume are back in 2018. Really. Sadibou, excuse me. Wow, I'm choking. Sadibou Sai. One of the better fighters right now in PFL as well. Dangerous guy, fun style. Just got that crazy highlight reel spinning head kick. He does have a decision win over him. Looking at earlier in his career, if there are any standout wins. Yeah, the losses are to guys you haven't really heard of back in the day at Heroes. Andreas Stahl, that one's fine. Rafael Mox was 7-6. And Mikael Parlo, 12-2 at GMC in 2015. So he came up on the German regional scene a little bit. I don't really know exactly how sold I am going to be here. Definitely have to do more due diligence on the Abu side, but just looking at the resume, doesn't seem like he has fought the same quality of competition as somebody like Strickland. But the thing about it is, Strickland, could still get booted in the face here, right? Dustin Stoltzfus, that was a nice knockout in that fight. Connected on the chin there. Strickland, we know that's one of the ways that you can take him out of a fight is to knock him out. He's a tough guy. He's fairly durable, does a good job rolling with shots if you just want to box with him. But if you include some deception like Alex Pereira did and mix up the levels, he was able to connect really hard with power shots. Granted, that's a former champion. But then Easy Dose used his clever kicking game in order to expose the chin of Strickland. I think that's another interesting way for Abus to try and target him here is to use his kicks and be very active with his kicking attack in this fight. I think Strickland's the guy who's a little bit proven over 5 rounds against UFC level opposition. We just saw what Jerry Cannonier produced against Marvin Vettori. It was a lot more of a closely contested fight in what we saw from Sean Strickland and Jerry Cannonier. So I think that Strickland's still proving that he's a top guy in the division, but this is another guy who could potentially test that chin of his. So I think that's what's making this an interesting contest for me. Let's pull up the betting odds here. Pulling up best fight odds. It's a terrible website at this point, but using it because they normally have the props, but there's no props available so far. So we're dealing with some early week trifling numbers right now. But what we've got is the best available price on Abu Sapien Magomedov at plus 148 on FanDuel. And we're looking at the best price on Sean Strickland as a favorite here, about minus 170 on Bet365 and Caesars Sportsbook. So it's an interesting fight where, we're dealing with about a 65% indication, a little bit less than that, maybe about 63.5, 64% indication here on the favorite, Sean Strickland. I think he should probably be slightly favored based on my gut instinct, but that seems a little bit a touch wide to me. I have to know what the cardio dynamic is, and how likely Abus is to take him out in the early rounds. I feel like those are the questions that my tape study is going to have to answer this week. So there's some insight into my process, but for me, definitely a lot more due diligence before I have to bet this fight. And Sean Strickland, I believe he's performed ably as a favorite. Let's pull up those statistics. Make sure I'm talking some sense here. We've got Sean Strickland, large body of work here, really large sample size at the UFC level. So 7-3, and his average odds have been -195. So he's been slightly profitable as a favorite, has dropped the ball a couple times as a favorite as well. Losses of -185 against Ponzinibbio via three-round decision, excuse me. Lost to Alex Pereira as a -125 or so favorite as well. So Strickland definitely dropped the ball a couple times as a favorite, but he's also been chalk and done pretty well. Against Jotko, Uriah Hall, and Hermanson, he was about a -200 favorite in all those fights at close and won those fights. So he's done a pretty decent job representing himself as a middleweight, as a favorite, but probably a stiffer challenge here this weekend in terms of the potential finishing power coming back his way. Next up, guys, we got the co-main event. Let's take a sip of the coffee. Let's say thank you to everybody rocking live with us. 25 people rocking with us live a little bit after midnight on the East Coast. So appreciate each and every one of you guys. We got 11 more great fights to talk about, so let's do it. Interesting one here, guys. Grant Dawson, Damir Ismagulov. Listen, for a while I was waving the Grant Dawson might be fraudulent kind of flag, just because I felt like the cardio dynamics weren't good. I bet Ricky Glenn plus 400 and ended up getting a draw in that spot. Felt like it was like one of my better bets I've ever made that didn't cash, right? He was beating him up at the end. And, Ricky Glenn really put the sticks to him. I think Cody Saptic said after the fight, that Ricky Glenn said to him, I kicked your ass, and he did. He did in that fight. But other than that, Grant Dawson's been aces, right? 8-0-1 in the UFC. When he needed to, he finished late, right? Against Leonardo Santos. I had a hedge bet, excuse me. I had Leo Santos, bets, I think by KO, and I think money line small. And then I put Dawson round 3 plus 1,200 because I was like, if he's going to win this fight, he's got to come back late when Leo Santos gasses out. And boy, did he ever, right? Those bop, 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 hammer fist to put him out late in the fight. It was brilliant stuff. And, nothing too sophisticated about it, just knowing that he needed the win and being violent and finding a finish. That was important for his career and his development. Getting away from the James Krause situation, huge for his career development. Look what happened to everybody else that stuck around. It stunted their career development by like a year in many cases, whereas he was already prepared to go elsewhere. American top team, proven championship level training environment. So I feel like he's done a lot of the right things here to improve his stock. 8-0-1. Man, it's a good resume, right? 11-fight unbeaten streak, going back to his last loss, which was via KO1. When you think Damir Ismagulov, you think a guy who's got a good jab. You think a guy who's got a good process. Very hard to look good against. Very difficult to get one over on. But all things considered, guys, he's talking about retirement. He's talking about being done with the sport, right? Who's hungrier? Who wants to be here more? I feel like it's got to be Grant Dawson. I feel like Grant Dawson's the guy who's been putting in the miles in the gym, who's been really working his way up the card, who's been taking a little bit, moving to the next right training environment, being a smaller fish in a bigger pond now, where he was the big fish in a small pond for a while. I think he's doing everything right and taking a lot of the right steps. So I think Damir is a really tough challenge for him. But when I think motivation, I think it's got to be with Grant Dawson here. He's not talking about retirement. He's not thinking about what's next for him. He's not thinking about moving on at all. And, I think when you want to fade Grant Dawson, you want somebody that can push a hellish pace and knock him the hell out, like Ricky Glenn, right? That was kind of what we saw there. I thought an archetype for a way to beat him. And also, you want somebody that could stuff a lot of these takedowns and nullify all his grappling. Grant Dawson showed in that Jared Gordon fight. Granted, Jared Gordon's a little bit smaller than him. Let's be fair about that. But Jared Gordon's still a tough guy. He normally has good cardio to go. and he just outworked him, out hustled him, and became the first man, I believe, to submit him in professional MMA. And Jared Gordon's no slouch on the mat whatsoever. So I think that said a lot about Grant Dawson's ability to come through when he needs it. He's a competitor. He's a game son of a bitch. And I think he really brings a lot of pressure in the octagon. So if you're half in and half out on your career and you're fighting Grant Dawson, I think you're going to be in for a hell of a night. I just think he's going to bring a lot of pace, a lot of pressure. And I don't think that he's going to be intimidated by the name and the reputation. I think he needs a breakout win. I think he needs something to take a big step up in the division. And, this is the hard way to do it. Maybe he doesn't go out there and get the same finish, but could he go out there and outgrind this guy and take one more takedown and just be stingy? I feel like he can do that. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And a lot of sharp guys I respect are going in the other way here. They're feeling the opposite. They think Damir is going to get the job done here. But, when I just think about this broadly speaking, and let's talk about some of the stuff on paper, right? Damir is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's going to be trying to leverage that jab, no doubt about it. But, he is 3 years older here. And again, 24-2. He's got a lot of experience under his belt, but he hasn't gotten where he wanted to in his career. Doesn't seem like the UFC hype or marketing machine is behind him. Whereas I feel like Grant Dawson has kind of been, I don't want to say like protected along the way up here, but let's look at the run. Marco Madsen, wrestling archetype, guy that's cardio and striking is maybe a little bit hit and miss, still a work in progress, let's say. Guy who's coming along, though, got a lot of good physical attributes, so still a good win there. Jared Gordon, right? I just listed off some of his credentials. Went to the draw with Ricky Glenn. Ricky Glenn is a guy who's a little bit up and down as well, but we certainly have to acknowledge, like, at his best, he's a long, awkward, lanky guy who's ornery, tough, and if he's still in there and you're tired and he's not, he's just going to lay it on you and make you feel it. So I feel like that was a good win, or excuse me, a good, performance overall. He got two rounds there, and that was the first fight he really started to slow down, dealing with the size, dealing with the length. So, more power to him. Let's go back and look. I think, is that a fight where he missed weight? Trying to see if I could find what the weigh-in was here. Nothing listed. Yeah, it just says 155-pound fight, so maybe he didn't miss weight. But either way, I feel like Dawson, he's done some good work in the UFC. You look at the wins, finishes over Trezano, Minner, Santos, Gordon, Madsen. Not bad stuff, but, you got to give the context. Minner's a guy who gets submitted if it goes to the second round, right? Or he gets finished if it's a fight where they're fixing the fight potentially. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, whatever happened there. Leonardo Santos, he's a guy who's in his 40s, and he's got a lot of great skills, but just didn't have the same ability to push a pace. So I think that there's definitely some caveats that we can make, but Mike Trezano, I want to say he's only been finished twice, if my memory serves. So, he's a really tough guy, local guy as well. So guy that's put in a lot of hard work. Shout out to the chat though, guys. I want to see what some people got to say. We got a lot of sharp people rocking in here. Our guy Chris says, agree, Dawson will go out on his shield and give it his all. I agree with you there. And he is the underdog in this fight. Talking about the odds that we're dealing with this weekend, we got Grant Dawson as a plus 110 dog on Bet365, and you're dealing with a minus 114. Best available comeback on Damir Ismagulov here as the favorite. So very interesting stuff. Let's take a look at the odds performance over time for these guys as well before we move along here, and we'll deal with what some of the people in the chat are saying. So if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, anything that you want to fire off, go ahead and do so. But for now, we've got 2 wins as an underdog, according to our friends over at BetMMA.tips, and that was on Contender Series against Adrian Diaz. Gets the submission there as a plus 150 underdog. I think he's been favored in every other UFC fight. If BetMMA Tips is to be believed here, The Jared Gordon fight does not have odds for. So let's see if I can find those odds. Itself, we've got Jared Gordon. Damn. Okay. We got to get a little bit ingenious here, folks. Appreciate the patience. Just want to make sure I'm giving you guys good information here about these trends. But the bottom line is, in most of his fights in the UFC, this guy Grant Dawson has been favored. He's a dog here. I think that's an interesting note. Definitely something that we want to take note of. Jared Gordon was the underdog there. So, yeah, Grant Dawson was an underdog on Contender Series. He hasn't been a dog against since. So I think that's an interesting note here as well. Let's go ahead and look at our guy, Damir Ismagulov. I know that he lost last time out as a plus 180 dog to our guy, Arman Tsarukyan. Prior to that, he had been favored in every single UFC fight. So, you know, he's back to his role as a favorite here, but he is coming off of a loss. It was a close loss, but a thorough loss against Arman Tsarukyan. And he got out-hustled, out-pressured by a younger guy who wanted to wrestle, wanted to get in his face, wanted to disrupt that jab. I think that's, you know, something that could be replicated by Grant Dawson potentially here. ATT is where Arman Tsarukyan gets some rounds as well. Maybe he's giving Grant Dawson a little bit of pointers here, what he should be working on, what he should be doing to get the win. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. My guy Matt R., shout out Matt, says they are both undefeated as favorites. So, yeah, exactly. It's probably going to close the pick'em here, you'd think, because people are going to be coming in with strong opinions on both sides. You know, I know some sharp guys, like I said, that want to be putting down on Damir Ismagulov, and I'm thinking not so fast. The more I look at this, the more I think Grant Dawson has something to offer here. So, fascinating fight, but I'm kind of leaning towards the slight underdog here in Grant Dawson. Shout out to Artem MMA, says, have you read Mark Hunt's book? I have not, but that is something that I will definitely consider doing. If it's a good book, please let me know. I have a lot of MMA books over here, as you guys can see, and I like reading more of them. So if you guys got a great recommendation, please go ahead and drop those for me, either in the live chat or in the comment section below. Appreciate when you do. I will definitely work on this. My guy, Cuban Assassin, I have so many posters. I have a lot of fight stuff, but I'm working on making this a more permanent space here. So thank you very much for the suggestion. I will get after that, and I appreciate it, man. There's a lot of good stuff that we can get going back there. So shout out to Artem MMA as well. Says it's a great book. So that's something that I got to get after. We got some people with the notebooks out. I appreciate that, guys. A lot of people comment with the notepad. I like to think that people are, you know, learning from the process as well, how they can go about doing this themselves. The best way to help somebody, in my opinion, is to show them what you do. And that's what I'm doing. You know, this is the way that I think about these fights off the rip. And then from there, I go through the research process, and we talk about that on Thursday's show. So appreciate everybody that rocks with us for the first look. I know it's a different crowd sometimes than even the people that watch on Thursday. So I appreciate you guys and appreciate the people that enjoy thoughtful MMA conversations. You know, we kind of take our time and really dig through every fight here. And so I appreciate everybody that has the attention span to do that with me. I got ADHD all over the place, but when it comes to MMA, I love freaking talking about it. It's all focused and zoned in. So just appreciate you guys that are sharing the conversation. Now, next up, let's talk about the featured bout of the evening. We've got Max Payne Griffin taking on Michael Morales. Man, interesting fight here. Michael Morales is way younger than Max Griffin. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here. He's going to be 1 inch taller, fighting out of Tijuana, Mexico, by way of Ecuador. Man, interesting fight because Max Griffin's a guy I bet on before. You know, I've gotten some interesting value, I felt like, from Max Griffin. You know, I thought there was an argument that he could have beat Neil Magny. I did bet him in that fight, 2 units at plus 235. I thought he fought hard for my dollar. I thought he made it look like a much more honest fight. I thought he hurt Neil Magny quite badly in that spot. So all things considered, the problem I have here, 37 years of age, creeping on the door of 38 years of age. He's looking better with age, says my guy Shane in the comments section. And I agree. That's definitely something to think about. But also, as you get right on that precipice of 38 years of age and you're fighting a guy like Michael Morales, who's shown an ability to recover when he got hurt in the UFC and then take people out like the Fugit knockout late in the fight, like the knockout in round 1 against Trevin Giles. He's shown off some versatility, went the 15 minutes on the Contender Series with Veretnikov. I have to revisit that fight. I don't really remember it too well. Wasn't the most memorable Contender Series fight, but again, he gets the contract. So a lot of, promise from this young man, 24 years of age. That's a lot to like. I think when I think about the problem for Max Griffin, it's almost that he slows down too much over the course of his fights. I bet Max Griffin hugely against Tim Means, and that was a fight that was great for him because Tim Means, as he's gotten longer in the tooth, as he's gotten a little bit older in his career, he's struggled to pace himself over the 15 minutes. So I felt like that was a good spot for Max Griffin. Against Michael Morales here, I'm not sure that he's going to slow down. So shout out to my guy Moyes Audio in the comment section. Says, always bet Max round 1 KO, all fast twitch, boom, boom. Fair play. The thing is, if he gasses out at all, I think then he could get really hurt down the stretch here. I think that, in ways that Neil Magny's not going to maybe make you pay in round 3 every time, I think that Morales could definitely be more of that pressure throughout the 15 minutes. I thought it was impressive how he did that against Fugit as well. I didn't think he looked perfect against Fugit, but I did think that he looked like a guy who's still making improvements and a guy who is able to recover when he is in bad situations. And I just feel like when you have a 37-year-old, they're going to have to fight a very good fight, a very close fight, or they're going to have to get the knockout early. So I definitely think that Griffin has a lot of good skills. He could definitely bring the pain here. Good nickname, all that stuff. But against a really young, scrappy guy, I think it's going to be a tough fight for him, and I think I'm curious to see what the odds are here. Let's take a look. Okay, now I see why people are defending Max Griffin. He's got a plus 200 by his name, and this ain't no Neil Magny, right? A guy who's a little bit less proven in the division. Let's look at his record here as a dog. Max Griffin, unfortunately, as a dog, is 2-5 in the UFC for a minus 1.29% ROI, according to our friends at BetMMA.Tips. And that includes, losing a plus 240 to Neil Magny, losing to Alex Oliveira. So the last time he won as an underdog was against Zelim Imadaev, all the way back in April of 2019, a plus 116 dog. He won as a plus 375 underdog against Mike Perry all the way back in February of 2018. So, oh God, I think Max Griffin, he could be due. That's one way to think about it. But for me, this is just like a fight where the favorite is priced too high and I can't get involved. But I think that the favorite's probably going to win, unfortunately. So I think that the tempting number on Max Griffin is almost nerve-wracking, right? That almost makes me think it's going to be tough. So I've liked what I've seen from Max Griffin, though, overall. I think he's shown a good body of work. I think he's shown toughness, trying to fight through adversity when stuff goes a little bit sideways. 7-7, though, in the UFC, 50%. Wins over Tim Means, Carlos Condit, Kanan Song, Ramiz Brahima, Zelim Imadaev, Mike Perry, Eric Montano. It's not the most inspiring set of wins, but we also have to contextualize that with Michael Morales wins over Adam Fugit, Trevin Giles, and Nikolai Veretnikov. So, yeah, for sure, the guy with better wins is Max Griffin, but also the guy who's probably a little bit more longer in the tooth, a little bit more, closer to the end of his career, let's say, respectfully. He's still got some good fights in him. Tough guy for sure, but Michael Morales, the much younger guy here, barring some massive red flags on tape, I don't think I'll be getting to Max Griffin this weekend at the window. Next up, we've got Arianne Lipski taking on Melissa Gatto. This is going to be a popular fight on Twitter. Can you guys guess why? It's because we got two young ladies in this fight, and Arianne Lipski, queen of violence, attractive young woman. I think that's going to garner some attention from the masses this week. And Melissa Gatto, almost like an attraction for different reasons, like kind of draws people's eye. She's extremely, extremely muscled for the women's divisions. Looks like she's on a lot of, supplementation, right? Takes her strength and conditioning very seriously, let's say. So it's a fascinating fight in a lot of ways. Melissa Gatto, a lot less experienced, only has about 11 professional MMA bouts compared to over 20 for Arianne Lipski. But for a while, all we could talk about was, man, Lipski just can't help but find a way to lose. She would find a way to lose fights. She seemed like she just couldn't get it right in the UFC. Had a couple finish losses as well. Got finished by Montana De La Rosa via ground and pound. Got finished via ground and pound against Antonina Shevchenko. Got finished via punches against Priscilla Cachoeira. So she was a girl that just was really showing some massive red flags in terms of her durability. And that could be a problem against Melissa Gatto, who does hit very hard, who's got the big kicks, who's got the big punches. But we also know that Melissa Gatto maybe slows down a little bit over the course of the fights. Let's go back and revisit her resume. Yeah, her last fight was against Tracy Cortez. She has a canceled bout against Jillian Robertson where she withdrew from the bout in September. So, she's been out over a year, and she's trying to come back here and get back on track. She got the win over Sijara Eubanks in round 3. That was a fight where Sijara Eubanks, again, it's just a comically bad gasser, right? Victoria Leonardo, she got the stoppage via broken arm there. Just kicked her in the arm and broke her arm. So, oh boy, that's a little tough. But I think the ultimate problem here is if you're showing all these ground and pound losses, that means that your ground game is super suspect, right? And Melissa Gatto is very dangerous on the ground. That was how she, kind of burst on the scene as well with a win in 2018 over Karol Rosa via Kimura. That kind of told us where she was at in terms of her level. She had a bunch of canceled bouts. Talita Bernardo canceled bout in 2019. Avila bout canceled in 2019. Agapova bout canceled in 2020. So she struggled to make it to the UFC, but now she's had some bouts under her belt. And she just seems like a little bit more athletic than somebody like Arianne Lipski. But the fight does have some red flags overall. I would be looking at unders. Fight doesn't go to decision. I'm curious what that's priced at. Let me pull up OddsJam and see if we have any totals released on these fights yet. Curious to know. Doesn't look like it for most of them. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have it yet. That's unfortunate. If anybody's got a total for me, I would be curious to know. But yeah, I just kind of think that I think this is a fight where I'll be potentially interested in the fight doesn't go to decision. A violence prop. Women's MMA is often priced to go to decision instinctively, and I just think this is one where we could see a finish. Next up, we've got a very fun fight between Ismael Bonfim and Benoit Saint-Denis. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorite bets in a long time. Let's pull up the Bet MMA tips here so we're not speaking out of turn. Make sure we get this right. So we've got my previous bets on this card. And Where is it? Where is it? Ismael Bonfim. This was a beauty, an absolute beauty. We had Bonfim plus 105 against McKinney and plus 250 to win via KO, TKO. The Roto Grinders prediction was Bonfim via KO2. Just absolutely how we drew it up there. Bonfim, I felt like was being severely underrated in that fight. You know, I had I had actually bet Abasov by sub for a quarter unit against Bonfim on the Contender Series, and we saw some improvements from him. We saw that he had worked on his game. We saw that he worked on getting back up to his feet. We saw that he worked on defending some submissions. But I think that this is an interesting matchup because the thing about McKinney is I felt McKinney was predictably going to tire and struggle down the stretch, and I didn't think he'd be able to take the damage that he was going to be taking from Bonfim, whereas I thought Bonfim could take a solid shot on the return. Whereas in this fight, I feel like just gut instinct, this is an insane line on Benoit Saint-Denis. I think that Bonfim, prior to the Contender Series, people were not as high on him. And I think they were definitely higher on his brother than they were on Ismael. And Ismael was kind of given what I thought was a soft landing in the UFC. Not that Terrence McKinney's an easy fight. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just styles make fights. And I felt like it was a horrible styles matchup for McKinney because I felt like Bonfim could meet him in the pocket, hit him just as hard, last longer in a fight that was kind of tit for tat like that. Whereas I think Benoit Saint-Denis, if he's smart, is going to mix up his wrestling and his grappling primarily in this fight. And I think that he can have a lot of success if he's doing that. So this is a fight that I don't think is an easy matchup for Bonfim at all. And I do think when you look at Benoit Saint-Denis, he got an absolute shellacking at the hands of Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. And I bet that fight, and I bet him ITD, and I was stunned, baffled, and bemused when he didn't get stopped there. But the truth is, he's one of the toughest SOBs you'll ever see. Shout out my guy, Rick the Ruler. He ain't kidding at all. And I think that Bonfim, he's riding a wave of momentum. He could be overconfident here. He could definitely come in a little bit overconfident. He's extremely favored to win this fight. He could also sell out to knock this guy out. And the thing that we learned about him is he's very hard to finish. He's very hard to knock out. So I think it's possible that he just gets lit up and knocked out here. But I think if he's able to get takedowns, if he's able to take some sting off these punches from the heavy-handed Bonfim, I don't think there's any reason why Benoit Saint-Denis can't compete. At 155, this guy's big. He's long. He's strong is what I meant to say, but he's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, a 3-inch height advantage. These guys are the same age. So except for the fact that he's coming out of Paris, France, and I will admit, that's a little bit of a red flag. It's a touch of a red flag, right? We want to just have respect, though. This guy's special forces. He'll fight for your dollar. I don't know, man. I think it's a little bit wide given the circumstances. So I feel like it's a dog or pass situation at the number. But I understand if you want to get on some props or something like that. It's just for me, Benoit Saint-Denis, tough as they come, man. Tough as they come. I felt like I predicted the dynamic perfectly against Easy Dose, and he just took all the shots and he never showed any signs of wanting to quit or get out in that fight. So absolute beast. Absolute beast. Next up, guys, I got to come clean. I don't absolutely know who Nursulton Ruziboev is. He's one of the UFC debutants here, fighting out of Renzo Gracie, Philly. So Renzo Gracie team, shout out. Stand up, boys. But let's think about this fight. Let's look at this guy's record because, guys, if you don't know anything about him, cheers to you. I don't know a damn thing about this guy. He's fought all over the world, it looks like. Octagon, a la Pride, Open Fight Championship. Mostly fought guys you never heard of. Certainly guys I've never heard of. Seems like mostly Russian and Eastern European fellows? Okay. Yeah, I don't know one of these people. So the truth is, I got to look into it. I got to look into it. He's got a bunch of losses on his resume. Let's look at the methods. He was submitted back in the day. He was finished via knockout in 2014, submitted via Kimura in 2016. And then he's otherwise lost a bunch of decisions. The records of the guys he lost to all look okay, except for 2 and 3. Anvar Chergesov at 7 fight 2015, and 5 and 5 Danyar Babakulov at Alash Pride FC. Yeah, so I honestly just need to do more due diligence on this guy. What we know about him, Uzbekistani fighter coached by Daniel Gracie. I'm going to pull up his Instagram as well. My man's got 1.3 million IG followers. Damn. Okay. So somebody's heard of him, just not me. He seems like a man of some prominence. Cool leather jackets. Knockout of the year with Brave last year. Okay. So he's got some hype behind him. Interesting stuff. And I'll have to watch. Because here's the truth, guys. He's got 5 times the professional experience here of Brunno Ferreira. Brunno Ferreira in his last fight, I don't think many people were predicting him to win. He's out of Evolução Thai MMA, and we saw 2 guys out of Evolução Thai really struggle last week. So Evolução Thai, I believe, is the gym for both the gentleman who fought Brendan Allen, whose name is Bruno Silva. Sorry, that's how I could think of it. And then also the gentleman who fought David Onama, Gabriel Santos. Both of those gentlemen are from Evolução Thai, I believe, and they both, ended up getting cleaned up in that fight. So does that trend continue here? Does Nursulton, get the win? Or does Brunno Ferreira continue his reign of terror? This guy's been destructive. 10-0. I want to say all 10 of those wins are by finish. I just pulled up his Tapology. Yes. 7 wins by knockout, 3 by submission. Knocked out Gregory Rodriguez in round 1. Knocked out Leon Alayu, 10-1 fighter on Contender Series in 2022. He knocked out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive opponents. Can he make it 6 in a row against Nursulton, Ruziboev? I feel like both guys are now stepping into the limelight for the first time. So it's an interesting one. Ferreira definitely seems like a front-loaded fighter. He had 2 canceled bouts here, but Al Hassan is the one who withdrew from the fight with Ferreira. So that's something I think to take note of as well. I think Brunno is a scary guy. I think he's got good finishing instincts. I think he's got good skills. I thought that the win over RoboCop was impressive, but his cardio is not as proven as his opponent here. Let's look at his opponent's record in decisions. And again, it's not the same. We just saw it with Ilia Topuria, how you can't let an unknown about cardio make you think that somebody's automatically going to lose. But I do think that that's something that we have to be concerned about here. So, wow. Nursulton Ruziboev is 2-6 career in decisions. Oh, my God. Maybe the UFC is just trying to set this guy up for a win. I don't know. If you guys want my honest opinion, gut feeling, it just seems like they're bringing in Nursulton to lose. And to build up Ferreira. But, it's hard to say that when the guy's got 50 pro fights. So I'm going to have to do more due diligence here and look into our UFC debutant. But I think Ferreira is a fun guy, big, scary banger. And, the way that RoboCop trades on the feet, he kind of leaves himself out there. So I didn't expect it, not like that. But Minus 300 at middleweight is a dangerous proposition. Just peeking over at the line here, looks like Brunno Ferreira is about minus 167 on Betway, minus 186 on FanDuel, and Nursulton is about plus 145 best available. So, yeah, for me, I'm definitely going to be holding steady. Got to do some due diligence. Next up on the card, guys. Wow. The prelim headliner. Can you guys believe this? The prelim headliner. Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee, the Motown phenom. Hats off to him. Hats off to him. He's back to the UFC, guys. I thought it was unfortunate when Kevin Lee was let go from the UFC. You know, he's a solid fighter. He's kind of one of these guys who's dealt with the fact that there is no 165-pound division in the UFC. You've got 155, you got 170. The guy who's a little bit, stuck in between, right? Kevin Lee, 155 is a brutal cut. You know, it's really tough for him. He can't really do it anymore. So at 170, he's just a touch undersized, right? Like, let's talk about the measurables in this contest. Kevin Lee going to come in 5'9" against a 6-foot tall opponent, but the difference is he's going to actually have the longer reach, 77 inches compared to just 74 inches for Rinat Fakhretdinov. In addition, Kevin is the younger fighter here by 1 year. It looks like 30 versus 31 years of age. So Kevin being the younger fighter, he's a little bit longer in reach. I think he's going to be able to compete in the wrestling phase in this fight as long as his knees hold up. You know, he's dealt with health problems. He's dealt with stuff outside the octagon. He's dealt with a lot of stuff, but he is a dangerous kicker. He's a dangerous puncher. And I don't think that we should sleep on Kevin Lee. You know, coming back to the UFC, I think the motivation is going to be at an all-time high to prove that he deserves to be here, to prove that he deserves more money, to prove that he deserves a long-term contract. I think financially it's essential that he wins this fight. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he approaches this fight. I think Rinat, we know how he's going to approach it. He's going to come out here. He's going to try and shoot takedowns. He's going to try and get on top of Kevin. And I think that that's probably what, would be his best path in the end. Making Kevin work at a really high pace rate we've seen in the past. That is how he has been slowed down, you know. Kevin is a guy that is really dangerous early in fights. First round and a half, first 2 rounds, he's normally extremely dangerous. But we've also seen when he fought Charles Oliveira, he's having a lot of success. And then it started to go sideways just for a moment. And you could just see him almost checking out and realizing it's going to start to not go well for him. I feel like as long as if Kevin can stay ahead in this fight, he will be able to win it. But I think if he's getting, put behind early, then it's going to be a really tough fight for him. So for me, the question of this fight is how dialed in is Kevin Lee this week? Does everything look like he is focused, ready to put on the performance of his life, showing up with the weight dialed in, everything? That's what I want to see from Kevin Lee this week. I feel like if he checks those boxes, I think he could really push Rinat and make this a difficult fight. Bryan Battle, young guy, work in progress, still dealing with that weight cut, still getting used to it. I think this is a different situation. Kevin Lee, former 55er at 170. Bryan Battle, former 85er at 170. Different story, right? Trying to manage weight, trying to manage that cut. I feel like Kevin Lee knows that 170 is his home for now in professional fighting, and I feel like he's moving forward accordingly. So I'm wishing him the best of luck this weekend. I like Rinat. I bet him in his last fight, I believe. Let me check. Let's go back to my list of bets. Yeah, absolutely. So Rinat Fakhretdinov, I bet for 2.55 units to win 1 unit against Andreas Michailidis. I felt like that was a great spot, right? I didn't think Andreas Michailidis had much to offer in terms of big knockout power on the feet, and I didn't think he was going to submit Rinat. So, I didn't think he had much to offer there. I think Kevin Lee is a much more dangerous fight for Rinat, and it's a similar line. Got to go with the underdog here or passing, personally, in this opportunity. Fun fight, though. Let's look at Kevin Lee's past history and see if he's fought any Russians. I'm kind of curious. So Kevin Lee submitted Magomed Mustafayev via submission in round 2 in 2016. Hell yeah. American pride, baby. There it is. That's the only one. Wow. Kevin Lee beat Mansour Barnoui all the way back in 2012. This guy's been fighting forever. He's fought a lot of really high-level guys over the years, and he's lost a bunch of fights, but he's won a lot of fights too. He's beat a lot of good guys, and I'm excited to see what he can produce here. Back to the UFC. I think he deserves to be here, and I'm hoping to see an improved performance from Kevin Lee. I think he owes it to himself. Next up, guys, we've got a prelim at 145 pounds in the women's featherweight division. This is still a division. Who knew, right? Who knew? Cheers to that. We could all cheers to that. When you do so much talking solo, guys, it requires more water. So appreciate you guys rocking with me. It is 1 a.m. local time, and I feel no signs of slowing down. We got the odds mug, drinking coffee, and ready to roll through the rest of these fights. So Yana Santos, 14-7, taking on Karol Rosa, 16-5. And these are two ladies that have let me down over their time in the UFC. And, they've both done a decent enough job. I should say Yana Santos, Yana Kunitskaya, however you know her. She is with Maheta, the PFL's suspended light heavyweight homie, former UFC fighter, John Jones, truther, right? Only guy to ever get a card against John Jones. So shout out to that guy. But overall, Yana Santos lost to Holly Holm in her last fight out. That was in March of 2023. So she's getting back in there pretty quickly, right? 3-month turnaround here. I felt like that was at least a marginally competitive fight, but just didn't show off great takedown defense. If my memory serves, I could pull up UFC stats and check. Irene Aldana went out and finished her while she was pregnant. I mean, just absolutely, it probably should be a hate crime. I'm kidding, of course. She got the win over Ketlin Vieira in somewhat suspect fashion, but that was a huge, huge win, at the time. And she did it based on optics, right? She just was a little bit more violent and aggressive in that spot. That's a huge win in terms of how it ages. I feel like that's what keeps her in the game. I feel like that big win. She got the win over Stoliarenko. I mean, how much does that count in this day and age for her merit in the division? I'm not sure. Stoliarenko has gotten, a couple armbar wins, but she's really proven to be somewhat limited fighter. Shout out to the chat, guys. We got my guy Chris says, yep, 1 a.m. for us East Coast New York guys. Almost didn't jump in, but I'm off tomorrow. Appreciate you, brother. Know we're rocking live. But the other thing is, guys, if you ever got to dip out early, we still love and appreciate you. You could always check out the show on podcast. That information is in the description below. But you could also just search Liam Picks Fights anywhere you listen to shows. You can find me easily. So appreciate you guys. I always try and put up the audio from these live streams as soon as possible. So anybody who can't make it with us live, we'd love to have you here live, and we always appreciate it. But if you can't make it, no skin off your nose, guys. You can always get at me on Twitter, at Liam Picks Fights, on Instagram, wherever, with questions, comments, concerns that you have. And you can find the audio for the show on podcast. So appreciate everybody's support there. But now let's talk about the other half of this fight, right? Because basically the problem with Yana Kunitskaya is she gets finished all the time. Here's the problem with Karol Rosa. She doesn't finish nobody, not in the UFC. She goes to decision with Norma Dumont, decision with Lena Landsberg, decision with Sarah McMahon, decision with Betchko Ham. By the way, she lost to Sarah McMahon. She lost to Norma Dumont. So she's going up and down in these fights, but her wins over Lena Landsberg, Betchko Ham, Jocelyn Edwards, Vanessa Mello, Lara Procopio, they're all by decision. So the UFC You know what they did in this fight? They said, Karol, we are literally going to fire you, even if you win, unless you go out there and finish this woman. Please, God. Please, for the love of God. She gets finished in every loss. Please go finish her. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be at 145, and Yana Santos has something to prove here. You know, it's tough when you get 3 losses in a row. That can easily be your walk-in papers from the company. That could be, thanks for playing, but see you next time. And she was supposed to fight Macy Chiasson, and Macy Chiasson withdrew from the fight. So I think that is crazy stuff. I think that, we've got a difficult fight to call here. The things that bode well for Rosa are what? She trains at Piranha Valetudo. She gets a lot of work on the ground. We've seen struggles from Yana Kunitskaya on the mat. We know that her, or Yana Santos, I should say, excuse me, dropped my phone. We know that Yana Santos has struggled on the mat at times in her career. And when people are able to lay on ground and pound and really hurt her, that could be a problem. Karol Rosa, at her best, does get off with some ground and pound, does lay it on as fights go on, does show decent enough cardio to win over 15 minutes. So I feel like it's an interesting fight, and I have to lean towards the younger girl here in Karol Rosa. I just think that she's got a little bit more left to give. I haven't always loved what I've seen in terms of competitive spirit from Yana Santos, but I do think it bodes well for her that she's getting right back in there and staying active. So let's take a look at the line here. Karol Rosa is a slight favorite here, minus 160, just about a 60% favorite on the line. And we're looking at plus 130 to plus 150 comeback here on Yana Santos. So fascinating. Let's look at their resumes, guys. Let's take a look here, see how they've done against the number. So we've got Yana Santos as an underdog. She's 2-5, guys. 2-5. Not very bright. Not bright results there. Karol Rosa, on the other hand, as a favorite, 5-1 for a 22% ROI. So yeah, my gut instinct here lines up with the trend. The trend suggests Karol Rosa is going to get the job done here, but WMMA, I don't really have a habit of laying 60% chalk. I don't think Karol Rosa is a great finisher. I've bet her ITD before, and she's absolutely burnt me. So this is probably the time to bet it, but we'll see what the line is. Unless they give me something completely unreasonable, I'm gonna probably just let this fight go. Next up, guys, we've got something interesting to deal with. It's certainly got to be more interesting than that last one, right? Let's take a look at the next fight on the card here. Oh my God, I jinxed myself. I actually jinxed myself, folks. So if you're here watching with us live, I truly apologize that I just jinxed us, because I said it's got to be better next, and I don't know if it's any better because it's Ivana Petrovic, and I do not know who Ivana Petrovic is. Another UFC debutante here. We've got the 6-0 prospect out of Croatia, and I think she's going to get a lot of attention this week because she's Croatian fighting out of Norway. She's 29 years of age. She seems to be an attractive young lady as well. So that's going to factor into her marketability. 4-0 in the Aries FC promotion. I believe that airs on Fight Pass. And it looks like she's done that in a pretty short time, from 2022 to 2023. Her last win was by split decision in the Aries FC. But she also has wins via rear naked choke in the 3rd round and ground and pound in round 1. So seems like a girl that's got some ability to get finishes. Now, can she do that against the UFC tested Luana Dread Carolina? Now, that's going to be an interesting question. Right now, the Tapology community is convinced that she is absolutely 1,000% going to run through this Luana Carolina character, because 91% of Tapology votes are on Petrovic. So I've got to do my due diligence here and discover just who it is that is lighting up the Tapology community board. But Luana Carolina, let's examine her UFC resume and see if she's really worth her salt as a 3-3 UFC fighter. So last time out, she loses a split decision I would say, that probably should have been unanimous if my memory serves, but either way, let's give her the credit. She loses a split decision to the much more experienced former title challenger level girl in Joanna Wood, formerly Joanne Calderwood. So interesting stuff there. She lost via third round spinning back elbow knockout to Molly Meatball McCann. Tough look there. But she got a win over Lupita Godinez when she tried to bump up a weight class. That was impressive stuff. Stuff the takedowns, outworked her there. We just saw Lupi looking aces against Emily Ducote last time out. So that was a good showing for Luana. Poliana Botello, she got the split decision win there. That's okay. Lost via sub to Arianne Lipski. We were talking about Arianne Lipski before. Her ground game being a little bit suspect. That's a problem. But then again, she's got the win via decision over Priscilla Cachoeira. She's got a win on Contender Series. So Luana Carolina just seems like one of these girls who's a little bit up and down, but she's got some attributes. She's got length. She's long. She's physical. For me, the questions that I'm going to ask are in my tape study this week is, can Petrovic get this fight to the ground, and can she submit Luana Carolina? Because I think if that's the case, then I'll understand why she's so favored here. I think Carolina's ground game is really suspect. And I think that if you can extend her on the ground and force her into bad exchanges, she's in really, really tough spot. So that's something I'm going to be looking out for here. Seems like in terms of the measurables, everything else is very similar. And Luana has a lot more UFC experience. So I cannot support this money line price right now. But again, my influence, from research could change my mind here. But right now it feels like it's a dog or pass situation where, I'm going to need to see some real grappling acumen from Petrovic to feel good about that line. We've seen UFC jitters so many times, guys. Do we really want to get out over our skis with a UFC debutante that's 6-0 against a girl who's got 6 fights in the UFC? That just seems a little bit hasty to me. But again, let's wait and see what the research bears out, because there's always more to the story. Joanderson Brito, one of my favorite guys. Turbo, I think his nickname is, if my memory serves. Tuborado. I don't know what that means, but it looks like it's pronounced Tuborado. So that's an exciting nickname. He's taking on Westin Wilson, 16-7. Westin Wilson's got a big frame, 6'1", in terms of the height, 73-inch reach here. That's a 1-inch advantage over the 72-inch reach of Joanderson Brito. Brito is only 5'8" tall, but he is 6 years younger here. Wow, lot to discuss. Joanderson Brito is a dangerous, dangerous guy. But we've also seen him lose a fight where he kind of gassed out a little bit, got a little overzealous in the early going against Bill Algeo, a long, flowy, awkward, wrestly, grinding kind of guy, Oh, shout out to my guy, Matt R. He says, Tuborado means shark. So that's a great nickname. Shout out to Tabitha Baby Shark Ricci. Went out there and got the dub last week as well. So maybe 2 Brazilian sharks are going to eat in the ocean that is the UFC in these couple weeks. And this is absolutely a short notice replacement. To shout out my guy Chris, who is asking, is this short notice? Yes, it is. Westin Wilson was not supposed to get the call in this spot, but I do think it's at least interesting that, we've got a guy here who's going to be big, long, tall. But what's so fascinating is the win over Diego Lopez. That has aged well, even though Diego Lopez, the fight ended in controversial fashion with the foul. I think that was, an impressive performance. He lost to Algeo. Tough UFC debut, but we talk about the jitters. We talk about how that could affect people. Against Andre Fili, guys, the gift of a century. Let's go back and look at the tracked bets in that case. One of my favorite memories of a tracked bet. Ended up getting me Rangers tickets, playoff Rangers tickets for me and my father. I went 4 units on Joanderson Brito plus 250 against Andre Fili. Get that shit out of my face. I bet 2.3 units. when he fought Bill Algeo, and, it didn't work out. But I didn't sell my prospect down the river. No, I did not. I said, we'll do it again against Andre Fili, who everybody was saying is the parlay piece of the week. Now we're dealing with an unplayable line on our guy Brito, right? Before, what were we dealing with? Plus 250. Now we're dealing with minus 1,000, right? Looking right now, let's see if I could pull this up. Minus 1316 on Pinnacle. Just absolutely shocking numbers. So I feel like this is going to be a fight where maybe you get a line on the total. But if you can't get a line on the total, maybe you don't bet on this fight, because it's going to be a really tough way to attack it. I do think Brito is probably going to nuke him in the early going. That is what he is best at. But we'll see how it goes. It's going to be some interesting stuff. I think that the win over Lucas Alexander also aged pretty well, because Lucas Alexander, in his subsequent performance, went out there and styled on Steven Peterson when a lot of people thought he was not going to. So I think that, Joanderson Brito, a guy that people were not very high on, and now they're minus 1,500 high on him, seems like a slight overcorrection. If anything, I would be laying the dog on the money line, playing the dog on the money line here than laying the favorite based on the number. But I think Brito wins in the first round at a pretty decent clip, because he is just a huge, huge physical gap from Westin Wilson, in my view. Let's look at Westin Wilson's record for what it's worth. He comes out of Upstate Karate. He is 34 years of age here. 0-3 in the LFA, not promising. Got knocked out in the first round by Teruto Ishihara, who I think would get knocked out by Joanderson Brito in the first round. He got submitted in the first round by Carson Frey. He got go-go plotted in the first round by Andrew Tennyson. This guy is getting finished in the first round, and probably by sub. But, yeah, that's just my opinion. Brito's going to kill this guy. All right. We don't have to linger too long on that one. Seems fairly elementary. But shout out to Upstate Karate, getting another guy in the UFC. I think Westin Wilson could probably beat somebody in the UFC, but Brito just seems like a naturally terrible matchup for him. A guy who gets finished in round one against a guy who kills people in round one at an alarming clip, not a good mix. Alexandr Romanov against Blagoy Ivanov. Guys, I have done me some fading of Alexandr Romanov, and it has done me good. Marcin Tybura, Alexander Volkov. Gotten a couple nice little scoops here on this guy's heavyweight collapse, right? And there was a time when Romanov was the talk of the town. He was everybody's favorite heavyweight. I'm pulling up the fight right now. My previous bets, guys, I have never lost a bet tracked. I have 5 tracked bets on Alexandr Romanov. I'm just seeing this now. I've never lost a bet on this guy. My profit is over 10 units, over $1,000 US cash of profit on Alexandr Romanov fights. Most of that was not by betting on him, guys. I did bet 2.8 units on him as a minus 270 favorite against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. I'll tell you what, guys, if they fought again tomorrow, I would not bet it again. I would not bet it again. I bet 2.22 units at plus 350 on Alexandr Romanov's opponent, Marcin Tybura. And Marcin Tybura made me 7.77 units. Guys, if you do not follow me on Twitter, go look at the parlay slip. I retweeted it today. We went Angelusa, Leon Edwards, and Marcin Tybura. 3-legger at the pay-per-view when Leon Edwards head kick, bang. Just absolutely unbelievable stuff. So, oh my goodness. We've had a very good little run, with this guy. Here's the problem for me, right? Let's take a look at the line here. Blagoy Ivanov, just a slight underdog. I'll tell you the truth, guys. I'm not the biggest Blagoy Ivanov guy, right? There, some fighters you resonate with, some guys you don't. I bet Marcos Rogerio de Lima bigly against this guy. I thought Marcos Rogerio de Lima won the fight. I bet him at plus 135. Didn't get the nod, okay? Didn't go my way. I think when you're dealing with this fight, let's look at some of the measurables. We've got, 6'2" against 5'11". We've got 75-inch reach against 73-inch reach. Neither one of these guys is an elite striker in my view. But I think that the more sophisticated guy on the feet who can fight for longer is probably Blagoy Ivanov. But he is 36. He has had more fights. He does show a little bit more wear. I mean, for Christ's sakes, the guy was stabbed. So that can't be good for your body and your durability long term, except the fact that he never gets finished, right? So the guy has fought very close with some of the best guys in the world. He's a very tough guy. I can't really dispute why people want to play him here, why they're coming in on the dog. But also, I want to see how Romanov responds here. He kind of looked like he just fell off in his last couple fights. But, if you guys read my article, if you read my analysis that I did mention in my article last time out, he was in Moldova looking for a new training camp, kind of had separated from his old team, hadn't really found the next training environment that he was going to be at. So he was kind of doing his own thing. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Failure to prepare is preparing to fail, right? And that's what he did. He prepared to fail for that fight against Volkov. I don't know what he's done for this fight camp. So that's what my research will tell me. But this is why I do my due diligence and I do pretty deep research on what the guy's camp looks like as well. Because if a guy's not properly preparing for a contest, they're going to blow it. And he blew it last time. This is a fight that he needs to win for his career. 2 losses in a row. Do you want to make that 3 against an older guy who hasn't really broken through ever and who's not a big star? I mean, this is one that he needs to edge this out, whether that's laying against the guy on the fence, doing whatever you need to do. But we've also seen Blagoy give up takedowns before. He's just done a good job working his way back up to his feet, not getting submitted, things like that. I think that this is probably a fight that, I'm slightly favoring Romanov, but I wouldn't bet him because I feel like the line is about accurate. But I just can't trust this guy. Given his recent performances, unless he shows up looking like he's on all the steroids, I can't trust this guy. Last but not least, guys, we got a fun one. A banger at 155 to close us out. Guram Kutateladze taking on Elvis Brenner. Shoot the box, shoot the box, shoot the box. Diego Lima. Very fun fight, guys. We're dealing with some parity here in terms of the height and reach for these guys. 1 inch of height advantage for Guram, the Georgian Viking Kutateladze. He's going to be 5'11" compared to just 5'10" for Elvis Brenner. But they're both going to possess a 72-inch reach here. So 2 guys that are about the exact same size, except Elvis is the much younger guy here, and he's a huge dog. Guram is definitely a more tested guy. He's a good fighter, dangerous guy. But he's a guy who struggled to stay active in the UFC, struggled to stay in there. Loses a split decision against Damir Ismagulov. Canceled bout against Malarkey. He withdrew. Canceled bout against Thiago Moises. He had an injury. Canceled bout against Don Madge. He had an injury. Canceled bout against Don Madge. He withdrew. Wins a split decision over Mateusz Gamrot, where he raised his opponent's hand after the fact and said that he did not win. Canceled bout against Clayton Silva. Beat Felipe Silva at Brave FC in 2019. So let's summarize the body of work then. Since 2019, he beat Felipe Silva via knockout in round 1. He beat Mateusz Gamrot via split decision in 2020 in a fight that he did not believe he won. He lost to Damir Ismagulov in 2022 in June, and that's it. My man can't get in the damn octagon. So it's been really tough sledding for Guram Kutateladze. I get that he's a great fighter. I get that he's a dangerous guy. I get that he's a good athlete. But who's to say that a guy who's fighting 3 times in 4 or 5 years is a guy who should be minus 500 in a UFC fight against somebody 4 or 5 years his junior? That just seems a little bit surprising to me. We know that Elvis can spring an upset in this kind of odds range, right? He went out there against Zubaira Tukhugov plus 470 dog, it says on Tapology. I feel like it was a little bit closer to plus 400. Still, went out there and got the win over Zubaira Tukhugov. You know, I don't know, man. I feel like the line's off. Just instinctually, it just seems too wide to me. But I don't know Elvis' game that well. Let me see if I have anything in my notes on this kid. Elvis Brenner. Elvis Brenner. Let's see what I had in my full card breakdown here. So I was thinking that Tukhugov was the more well-seasoned guy. Brenner, UFC debutant from Shootbox Diego Lima. Brenner has struggled in extended fights with only 3 professional losses coming via unanimous decision. Interesting stuff. So for me, let's look at Elvis Brenner and who he's been fighting. He lost to Gabriel Santos outside the UFC. Interesting. So he's fought UFC level guys even before he made it to the UFC. Seemed like he took on pretty tough challenges along the way. So I'm interested to see what Elvis Brenner can produce here. I'm also curious to see where this is going to go in terms of the big favorite status. You know, when your wins in the UFC and your losses are by split decision, it kind of tells me you're fighting to a close margin. So making you a minus 500 favorite after that circumstance is tough. But I do think Brenner is a huge step down from the guys he's been fighting. It's just like, you know, it's 155, man. It's a globally competitive division. I'm just not convinced that it's going to be a wipeout in either direction here personally. So guys, any questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to throw out there, video suggestions, whatever you got, go ahead and fire them my way right now, because that wraps it up for the 12 fights that we've got on the card. That's my first look. That's what we're dealing with. That's where my head is at for these fights. You know, we don't have the props yet. That's where I've been trying to get sneaky, trying to exploit. Last week, you know, that's what I'll do right now. As you guys fire off questions, comments, anything that you got, I'm just going to recap what our betting results looked like from last week, because I want to start doing that in the interest of transparency, also in the interest of, you know, what lessons can we derive from the bets that we make that are good and the bets that we make that are poor. So, you know, my track betting results are available on betmma.tips/Liam Heslin. You can find that information in the description box below. And I'd be happy to share my screen or something like that as well as soon as I figure out how to do that. But for the interest of time, I'll just read off the results and we could talk about them one by one. So let's start with the first fight of the night, guys. My biggest regret on the card is that Cedriques Dumas did not make my tracked card on the money line. And he did end up making my card in the Lab VIP. You guys can always find that information as well in the description below. That's where I send all my up-to-date information, bets as I make them, things like that. And I did end up placing a small money line bet on him before the fight started. But I was trying to wait for his line to peak, and I ended up missing the best of it. And I'm very particular. I like trying to get the very best of the number. I like trying to get lines at their apex, things like that. And I just misread it slightly. It was available plus 165. Then I missed my chance at that. It was available plus 143, plus 125 on some books at close. So for me, I was just frustrated with myself that I waited to fire a little bit too long in that opportunity. Where I'm dealing with now is, you know, we've got a tricky fight card, because I ended up taking Dumas by sub, right? And it was plus 850. I feel like it was still a good bet. But anytime you take an underdog by a specific method and you don't take their money line, you're going to end up kicking yourself. So that was my lesson to move forward with, is that if I'm going to bet a you know, price on the prop, then I'm going to definitely take it on the money line. Because the truth is, guys, that plus 850 on the sub looked genius after the fact. I know it didn't cash. I know he didn't attempt subs that much, but he dominated the grappling against Brundage. The cardio dynamic that I cited was there. So I felt like a lot of the value at plus 850 was there. Didn't end up coming through, but that's what my strategy is about. Everybody's got a different way to approach the game, and I appreciate different ways of doing it. For me, I like looking for money lines and props that have a high value as well as a high return on investment potential, plus money plays. And I like to target those, and I try and mitigate risk as well by making multiple outs, by making responsible bet sizing a priority. And you guys can look at the results and see that for yourself. 9% ROI on the year, keeping it tight, keeping it one event at a time, picking my spots each and every week, and trying to be diligent. With that being said, I provide analysis for every fight every week and go deep on them. So some people bet more on more fights than I do, but I try and keep a very specific, tight game plan each and every week. That's what's been working for me, and that's what makes me feel confident and sharper in my plays. So I'm trying to work on my approach to get that ROI tighter and tighter over time. How can I bet less and win more? That's a goal for me. So the next bet we'll talk about is one that I'm very proud of. Joshua Van announces himself to the UFC flyweight division. If you guys watch and or listen to my first look and then my picks and preview show, you know that I went from Zhalgas Zhumagulov, because I didn't know anything about Josh Van. He's a UFC debutant. To by the time we got to bets and banter on Thursday, I was much more bullish on this Josh Van kid. Why? I watched his tape. I saw that this kid's fast. He's athletic. He's moving around great. He's fighting at a 4-ounce fight club, Daniel Pineda's gym in Houston, Texas. A lot of things that I like to see from the guy. So for me, I said to myself, wow, this kid's got real potential. He's going to fight hard with Zhalgas. Zhalgas isn't going to dominate him in any position. So it just felt like too wide a number. Ended up putting a quarter unit on Bet MMA Tips at plus 180. Ended up betting it for half a unit myself and in the lab VIP. I don't know why I tracked it for 0.25 units. I think that was an error. But also predicted him by KO in that fight. Man, he came very close, I felt like. To getting the knockout there over Zhalgas, a very tough guy who's very seasoned, very durable. But when you get a 21-year-old versus a 34-year-old at flyweight and it's plus 180, you got to take the risk, especially if the kid shows heart, panache, finishing ability, everything you want to see. So shout out to Josh Van. Would love to have him on the show one day. The kid put on an absolutely incredible display and really did a great job. So shout out to him. Shout out to my guy, J. Cole MMA says, LFG, Josh, great debut. Absolutely. Josh decision prop was also sick, man. I was eyeballing them both all week, plus 450 on the KO, plus 600 on the decision. I couldn't decide, so I just took the money line. But for me, man, it was an absolutely great spot. However you took it, the props, the money line, all good angles. And, if you took the overs there, it was a sweat, right? It was a sweat, but ends up doing the damn thing. Zhalgas went, to war. He took some big shots and stayed in it. So shout out to him. Despite talking about retirement with the Beatles haircut, flopping all over the place, he stood in the pocket and went back and forth. Next up, I had half a unit on Wellington Turman against Randy Brown. And betting Wellington Turman goes against everything I believe in because he's not a very good fighter. But the truth is, I would probably still make the same bet again after watching the fight. I felt like Randy Brown fought the fight I expected, and he won. My early lean in the lab VIP was Randy Brown via decision. But the problem was Randy didn't show great killer instinct. I felt like if Turman had gotten takedowns at a more consistent clip, and if he had shot double legs and single legs and wrestled a little bit better, we're having a different conversation. But ultimately, he wanted to be a Brazilian kickboxer. He went out there and did that instead. And, he still fought pretty close with Randy. So I felt like Randy was a little bit overvalued this weekend. I'll be curious to see if he's overvalued as well in this next fight. I feel like he maybe didn't impress people as much. So maybe he'll be undervalued. But I felt like that was a fight where, he left it somewhat within the margins. And, Turman at plus 200, I would have rather had that ticket than Brown in a long-term iteration of that fight, honestly. So I feel okay about that one. It's not a great bet, but it was a bet where I feel like it was like at worst case scenario, he looked like a plus 200 to me. So no skin off our nose there. Maybe no value, but I don't think we got hosed either. But then my favorite bet on the card, Maycee Barber, plus 170. Biggest bet on the card for me, 0.75 units. So again, just very tight bet sizing, but Maycee Barber came through, in a big way, right? I thought that she looked good, not great, or I should say great, not perfect, right? I thought she did a good job getting off on her big shots, doing a good job limiting takedowns, landing big elbow strikes in the clinch that really changed the dynamic of the fight. The big shots on the ground as well. Showed what you need to do to defend leg locks in MMA, which is stay patient, stay in good position, and then punish with strikes. So she did a lot of the right things in that fight, showed some progressions, showed some growth as well. So Maycee Barber continuing to put together a lot of the right elements at 125. Amanda Ribas continues to show at 125. She's not the same dynamic force. She's not the same, power wrestler and power grappler that she is at 115. So I think at 115, much better fighter, much more dangerous. I know it's a tough cut for her, but I think she's got to find a way, got to work with a nutritionist because I think at 125, it's really tough sledding. And, I mentioned it before the fight. I think Maycee Barber at 125 is just a different animal than somebody like Amanda Ribas. Felt like Ribas felt that physicality throughout the fight. So really proud of that read. Co-main event, took the nice casher there. And main event read, a lot of people were selling Josh Emmett, which no problem there. I get it pre-fight. But I think hindsight, my read wasn't perfect, right? I thought he was going to get him done early. And Josh Emmett showed the heart of a lion. He just stayed in the pocket and took everything. But, Ilia Topuria also showed he didn't want to use his wrestling and his grappling and take him out of there. He wanted to show he could paint a masterpiece on the feet over 5 against this guy. And that's exactly what he did. So, I felt like a lot of the analysis was on point last week. Want to keep it going again this week. So the research process starts in earnest today. Going to go a lot deeper on these fights, but love talking them out with you guys, given the thought process, giving where we're starting at in terms of my headspace for these fights. And then you'll see as we delve into the research, how the process starts to develop and eventually gets to the picks, gets to the final reads and analysis. So we're going to be looking at the fighter's physicality. We're going to be looking at their level of preparation. We're going to be looking at how they have, who they've been training with, and really get a good grasp on what these fights are going to start to look like and shape up as. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for props. We already have one great guest lined up, friend of the show. You know him, you love him. Clint from Die Hard MMA will be on the program. One other great guest to be announced very shortly. So, guys, make sure that if you're excited for that stream, go show love. Go show love to my guy, Clint, as well, Die Hard MMA. But also, guys, stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter at Liam Picks Fights if you haven't already, because we're going to have more great announcements coming soon, including who that other guest is. So I'm just waiting on confirmation from them before we make it official. But 2 great guests, 2 great friends of the show that I think you guys would be really excited to hear from on Bets and Banter on Thursday. The other announcements that we have for the show, the podcast, guys, I am very close to monetization on Spotify. Big milestone for me, big goal along the way. If you guys could help me out, if you enjoy this show, if you enjoy what we do on Bets and Banter on Thursday, it's one podcast feed for all the content that I do, all the shows, they get uploaded right to there. So I appreciate everybody that rocks with us in the chat, everybody who's here live on YouTube. But to help more people discover the show, just going ahead and following us on Spotify, downloading the show, giving it a listen that way. If it works with your listening habits, I really appreciate when you do. The other thing is, if you haven't already, guys, like this video. We have a lot of people that watch the video that don't click that like button. Drop a like a Trevor Fist or like a Trevor Peak Hammer Fist. We'd really appreciate when you do. Get subscribed to the channel if you're not already. That's the biggest way to support as well. We've got a lot of people that watch the show but haven't subscribed yet. So hope to earn your subscribe this show. And if not, come back next time and we'll do it on Thursday. So thank you guys again for your support. Talking UFC Vegas 76, but we're talking UFC each and every week here on this channel. So get subscribed if you're not already. Drop a like to support the show. God bless you all. Enjoy the fights. Until next time. Talk then. We'll see ya.